All right, get ready because today we're going deep on a topic that's, well, it's both fascinating and chilling. It's the history of witch hunts.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
imagine just living in a time when just a simple accusation,
Oh, yeah.
like just a simple accusation, could lead to, well, fueled by fear and superstition, of course, could lead to imprisonment,
Of course.
torture,
Oh, absolutely.
even death. And that was the reality for thousands of people across Europe and America
Right.
for centuries.
For centuries. Yeah. It's really a dark chapter of
Yeah.
human history, but it's one that I think offers
Yeah.
really valuable insights into the dangers of, well, unchecked power,
Yes.
mass hysteria, the
So-
enduring consequences of prejudice.
Absolutely. And to help us navigate through this complex
Oh, yeah.
and often very disturbing terrain,
Yeah.
we are joined by the brilliant Professor Marion Gibson,
Yes.
whose book, Witchcraft, A History in 13 Trials, is really going to be our roadmap.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic
Book for this deep dive.
Yeah.
Um,
Her work is remarkable, I think, in its scope and depth, offering a very global perspective on witch hunts, examining both the common threads, and the unique characteristics that shaped these events across different cultures and time periods.
yeah, and we'll be focusing on 4 specific trials from her book, each offering a unique window into this dark period.
Yeah.
And we'll start in late 15th century Austria,
Okay.
a time when the fear of witchcraft was very much on the rise,
Right.
fueled by, well, the religious anxieties and social upheaval.
Absolutely. A lot of change happening at that time.
Yeah. And this is where we meet Helena Schobran,
Okay.
a wealthy and outspoken woman
Yes.
in Innsbruck. And she dared to challenge the authority of one of the most notorious figures in the history of witch hunting, Heinrich Kramer.
Heinrich Kramer. Oh, yes. The author of the infamous Malleus Maleficarum.
Yes.
The Hammer of Witches. A treatise that would become a very chilling blueprint
Oh, yes.
for the persecution of countless individuals accused of witchcraft.
Now, Kramer was a Dominican friar obsessed with rooting out heresy and witchcraft.
Yeah, he saw evil lurking everywhere,
Yeah.
particularly in the form of women,
Hola.
whom he viewed as inherently weak and susceptible to the devil's temptations.
And Helena, being a woman of independent means and spirit, was not afraid to stand up to him
No, she was not.
at all.
Not at all.
She refused to attend his sermons,
Right.
openly criticizing his views and calling him, well, a heretic.
Wow.
This defiance, you can imagine, did not sit well with Kramer.
Not at all. He saw her as a direct threat to his authority and a prime example of the kind of woman who needed to be brought under control.
Yeah.
So he orchestrated a campaign to accuse her of witchcraft, using his influence to gather accusers and manipulate the legal system.
And this is where the story takes a really sinister turn.
Yeah.
The trial took place in an inquisitorial court.
Oh, yeah. A system that gives immense power to the inquisitor,
Right.
who acts as both judge and jury. Yeah, it was a system that was ripe for abuse, especially when wielded by someone like Kramer, who was so driven by a fanatical zeal to expose and punish those he deemed guilty of witchcraft.
Sounds like a total nightmare.
It was.
So how did Helena fare
Yeah.
in this incredibly hostile environment?
Well, remarkably, she didn't back down. When the inquisitor started asking her these deeply personal and invasive questions, she just flat out refused to answer, asserting her right to privacy and dignity.
What courage.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to imagine standing up to that kind of authority,
Oh, for sure.
especially with your life on the line.
Right, exactly.
Her defiance was really remarkable, and it wasn't just Helena who objected to Kramer's tactics. Other powerful men present at the trial also voiced their concerns, forcing Kramer to kind of rewrite his accusations and modify his approach.
So even in this atmosphere of fear and suspicion,
Yeah.
there were glimmers of reason and fairness.
Exactly. And perhaps even more remarkably, Helena managed to secure a skilled lawyer,
Right.
someone experienced in ecclesiastical law who was able to mount a strong defense on her behalf.
Okay.
From that point on, the trial became much more balanced than anyone, especially Kramer, had anticipated.
Wow, so what was the outcome
Yeah.
of this high-stakes legal battle?
Well, against all odds, Helena was acquitted.
Really?
Yeah, a rare victory for someone accused of witchcraft, especially with someone like Kramer leading the charge.
Yeah.
However, as you might imagine, this did not sit well with the infamous witch hunter.
I bet he was furious.
Oh, absolutely. Enraged by his defeat, Kramer doubled down on his misogynistic beliefs, seeing Helena's acquittal as further proof of the cunning and deceptive nature of women.
It's like he was using her case to justify his own prejudices.
Exactly. And this is where his infamous book, The Malleus Maleficarum, comes in.
Right.
It's widely believed that he wrote it, at least in part, as a direct response to Helena's defiance.
So one woman's courageous stand against injustice
Yeah.
inadvertently fueled the very ideology that would lead to the persecution of countless others.
That's the tragic irony of this story. The Malleus Maleficarum became so widely disseminated,
Right.
such an influential text, solidifying the link between women and witchcraft in the minds of many,
Yeah.
providing a pseudo-legal framework for the witch hunts that would just sweep across Europe
Wow.
in the following centuries.
What a chilling turn of events.
It is.
It's a reminder that even in moments of triumph,
Yeah.
the fight for justice is often a long and arduous one
Yeah.
with unforeseen consequences.
Indeed.
Oh.
And Helena's story is a testament, I think, to the power of individual courage in the face of oppression.
Absolutely.
But it also serves as a stark warning about the enduring dangers of fanaticism and the ways in which personal vendettas can be used to justify widespread persecution.
So we've gone from a defiant woman challenging a powerful inquisitor to a deeply disturbing legacy that would impact the lives of countless individuals.
Right.
It's a lot to process.
It is. It is. And as we move on to our next case, the North Berwick witch trials in Scotland, we'll see how this fear of witchcraft becomes intertwined with royal anxieties and political maneuvering,
Okay.
leading to even more tragic consequences.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit now and journey north to Scotland, to Scotland in the late 16th century. It's a different time and place, but as we'll see, the fear of witchcraft is just as potent,
Right.
and the consequences just as devastating.
Absolutely. And what's particularly striking about the North Berwick witch trials, I think, is the direct involvement of King James VI,
Right.
who would later become James I of England.
Right.
He was just utterly convinced that witchcraft was a real and present danger, not just to individuals,
Yeah.
but to the monarchy itself.
So unlike the case of Helena Schoberin,
Right.
where it was more about a personal vendetta, here we have a king who's basically institutionalizing the witch hunt.
Precisely. James VI was deeply suspicious of anyone who challenged his authority, and he saw witchcraft as a tool that could be used to undermine his rule. He was particularly influenced by events in Denmark where there had been a series of high-profile witch trials
Okay.
involving accusations of treason and plots against the king.
So it sounds like he was importing these anxieties
Yeah.
from Scandinavia and projecting them onto his own kingdom.
Exactly. And this paranoia really reached fever pitch in 1590 when a series of storms disrupted his voyage back to Scotland from Denmark with his new bride, Anne.
Oh, well.
James was convinced that these storms were not natural phenomena, but rather the result of witchcraft.
Talk about some bad weather ruining your honeymoon.
Yeah.
But seriously, it's incredible how easily a powerful ruler can be swayed by superstition and fear.
And it's not just about being swayed. You know, James actively sought out evidence of witchcraft, presiding over the North Berwick trials himself.
Yeah.
He even wrote a book on demonology,
Oh, really?
outlining his beliefs and reinforcing the idea that witchcraft was a direct threat to his authority and the stability of the realm.
So he's not just a passive observer, he's an active participant
Absolutely.
in the witch hunt.
Absolutely. And this royal obsession really had a chilling effect on the trials.
Yeah.
Those accused, many of whom were healers and midwives,
Okay.
were subjected to just horrific torture
Okay.
to extract confessions.
Right.
They were forced to implicate others,
Yeah.
creating this web of accusations that
Yeah.
ensnared dozens of people.
It's just heartbreaking to think about, those who are simply trying to help others
Yeah.
being demonized and tortured in this way. Their skills and knowledge,
Yeah.
once valued by their communities,
Right.
were now twisted into evidence of evil.
And the confessions themselves, often elicited under duress, were just highly unreliable. They included these fantastical tales of demonic pacts, night flights, and plots to harm the king.
Yeah.
These stories, fueled by James's own anxieties,
Right.
really fed the public's fears
Oh, yeah.
and legitimized the brutal methods used to extract them.
It's just a vicious cycle of fear, paranoia, and violence.
Precisely. And in the case of the North Berwick trials, there's another layer of complexity
Okay.
that I think reveals the deeply political nature of these accusations.
Uh-huh.
A powerful nobleman, Francis Stuart, Earl of Bothwell,
Okay.
was implicated in the alleged plot against the king.
Wait, so this isn't just about common folk being accused.
Right.
This is about power struggles within the nobility.
Exactly. Bothwell was a rival of James VI.
Okay.
And some historians believe that the accusations against him,
Right.
and by extension, the entire network of accused witches, was part of a larger scheme to discredit and eliminate him as a threat to the king's power.
So it's a reminder that these witch trials weren't just about superstition and religious fervor.
Right.
They were also about consolidating power and crushing opposition.
Indeed. And while Bothwell managed to escape and was eventually acquitted,
Right.
the same cannot be said for many of those accused alongside him.
Right.
You know, they were tortured, imprisoned, and some even executed,
Yeah.
all based on flimsy evidence and politically motivated accusations.
It's just a sobering reminder of how easily justice can be perverted when fear and power intersect.
Absolutely. And as we move on to the Finnmark trials in Norway,
Okay.
we'll see how this pattern of scapegoating and persecution takes on an even darker dimension as it intersects with colonialism and racial prejudice.
Okay, so let's head even further north now
Okay.
to the Finnmark region of Norway in the late 16th and early 17th centuries.
Okay.
And as we'll see, the witch hunts here take on a particularly disturbing dimension
Yeah.
as they intersect with colonialism and the persecution of indigenous peoples.
The Finnmark trials represent a tragic convergence of several factors.
Yeah.
Lingering influence of the Scottish witch hunts,
Right.
the ambitions of a really ruthless governor, and the vulnerability of the Sami people who are already facing pressure from encroaching Scandinavian settlers.
So it's not just about religious fervor or political maneuvering anymore.
No.
Right. It's about the exploitation and demonization of an entire culture.
Exactly. The Sami people had their own spiritual beliefs and practices,
Right.
often rooted in their deep connection to the natural world.
Of course.
But in the eyes of the incoming authorities, these traditions were seen as evidence of paganism and witchcraft.
It's a classic case of cultural misunderstanding and demonization,
Wow.
where the dominant group imposes its own worldview
Right.
and persecutes those who don't conform.
Exactly. And the driving force behind these trials was a man named John Cunningham,
Okay.
the Scottish governor of Finnmark.
Wait a minute. Is this the same Cunningham
Yeah.
who was involved in the North Berwick trials back in Scotland?
The one and only.
Wow.
It seems he brought his obsession with witchcraft with him to Norway.
Oh, wow.
He saw these similarities between the Sami practices
Right.
and the accusations he'd encountered back in Scotland.
So he's basically exporting the witch hunt,
Yeah.
applying a template from one culture
Yeah.
onto another with, well, devastating consequences.
Precisely. Cunningham was convinced that the Sami people were engaged in all sorts of nefarious activities, from causing storms to harming livestock
Wow.
to plotting against the authorities.
And of course, these accusations were often based on, well, flimsy evidence or outright fabrications.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The trials relied heavily on coerced confessions obtained through torture and intimidation.
Yeah.
The accused were often forced to implicate others,
Like,
creating a web of accusations that just spread fear and suspicion
yeah.
throughout the Sami community.
It's a chilling example of how prejudice and power can be used to justify the persecution of, well, an entire people.
And the consequences were horrific. Scores of Sami people were imprisoned, tortured, and executed. Their lands were seized, their traditions suppressed, and their culture demonized.
It's a tragic chapter in history, one that highlights the devastating impact of colonialism and the ways in which the fear of witchcraft can be used to legitimize oppression.
And it's important to remember that these witch hunts weren't just about eradicating so-called evil. They were also about consolidating power and control.
Right.
The persecution of the Sami people allowed the incoming settlers to seize their lands and resources, further marginalizing them and solidifying the dominance of Scandinavian culture.
It's a pattern we've seen repeated throughout history, the demonization of the other as a means of justifying exploitation and conquest.
And as we conclude our journey through these 4 trials,
Yeah.
I think it's worth reflecting on the larger themes that connect them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've seen how fear, prejudice, and the abuse of power can converge to create a climate of suspicion and violence.
For sure.
We've seen how easily accusations of witchcraft can be used to target individuals and groups who are already marginalized or vulnerable.
Right.
And we've seen the devastating consequences of these persecutions, both for the individuals involved and for the communities they represent.
It's a sobering reminder of, well, the fragility of justice and the enduring power of fear and hatred.
And it's a call to vigilance. The witch hunts may be a thing of the past,
Right.
but the forces that fueled them, prejudice, intolerance, the desire to scapegoat,
Yeah,
are still very much with us.
absolutely.
We need to be mindful of these tendencies,
Yes.
both in ourselves and in our societies, and to resist those who seek to exploit them for their own gain.
It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their differences, and standing up against injustice wherever we see it.
Exactly. And I think part of that involves understanding history, learning from its mistakes, and honoring the memories of those who suffered as a result.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Professor Gibson's book, Witchcraft, A History in 13 Trials, is a great place to start,
Absolutely.
offering a nuanced and thought-provoking exploration of this complex and often disturbing chapter of human history.
And for those who want to delve deeper, there are countless other resources available, from scholarly works to historical novels and documentary.
The podcast.
Yeah, the more we learn about the past, the better equipped we are to navigate the present
Absolutely.
and create a more just and equitable future.
So keep exploring,
Yeah.
keep questioning, and keep learning.
Yeah,
Because the pursuit of knowledge is a lifelong journey.
it is.
And the stories of the past have much to teach us about ourselves and the world we live in today.
Well, that's a wrap on this deep dive into the history of witch hunts.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Thank you.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration.
Yes.
So be sure to subscribe and stay tuned.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, keep exploring.